Welcome to the deep dive, everyone. We have a uniquely dark and fascinating exploration for you today.
Yeah, we really do. It's quite the rabbit hole.
It totally is. So today our mission is to explore a text called Liber Archon. And this was written by a man who calls himself Reverend Frederick W. Nagash.
Right, and it basically serves as the foundational manual for this organization called Laevus Manus Luciferi, which, if you translate that from Latin, it means the left hand of Lucifer, or LML for short.
Exactly. But before we get into the wild origin story of all this, I want to clarify something for you listening. This source material deals extensively with, literal devil worship.
Right. Very intense anti-Christian sentiments, dark religious practices, all of that.
Yeah, so we're just neutrally unpacking the text today. We're looking at its internal logic and subculture without endorsing any of its religious or political viewpoints. We're just like your anthropological tour guides here.
Exactly. We're mapping the territory, not endorsing the theology. Because, the big picture here is that while the subject matter sounds totally chaotic, the text actually outlines an incredibly structured universe.
Oh, it's basically a corporate bureaucracy of the occult. Which brings us to the hook. The wildest origin story for a highly rigid organization I think I've ever heard.
Yeah, the origin story is just, it's hard to wrap your head around.
It really is. So let's unpack this. It's April 13th, 2011. Reverend Nagash takes a massive dose of the hallucinogenic plant Salvia divinorum.
Which is not a mild substance.
No, not at all. So he takes this and he spends 10 minutes basically paying homage to the porcelain god in his bathroom, just riding out this intense trip.
Right.
And after 10 minutes, he emerges with the entire structure of LML completely outlined in his mind, like the whole thing.
He completely upends our standard cultural narrative of how these fringe movements begin, Usually you'd think it evolves slowly over decades.
Right, like a group of people debating philosophy in a basement somewhere.
Exactly. But here you have an entire highly regimented worldview just allegedly downloaded into a single mind in the time it takes to brew a pot of coffee.
And he even uses this weird numerology to justify it. In the text, he claims that the date, 4132011, equates to 3 4s.
Oh, right, the math breakdown.
Yeah. He says 4 is the month, then 1 plus 3 is 4 for the day, and 2 plus 0 plus 1 plus 1 is 4 for the year, 3 4s. Like, okay, basic apophenia, right?
Yeah, finding meaning in random patterns. But,
Yeah.
It ties into this concept of sudden divine inspiration, or
Right.
gnosis.
Right.
Fringe movements often rely on these unrepeatable, highly personal revelations because they establish absolute authority.
Because you can't really argue with it, right?
Exactly. If he built it through trial and error, his followers might say, hey, let's change this rule. But if it's a spontaneous download from the dark princes...
Then there's no room for democratic debate. It's just set in stone.
Yeah, it anchors the subjective, chaotic drug experience into the shared reality of the calendar. It tells followers that the universe specifically scheduled this revelation.
Which is such a powerful hook if you're looking to join something like this. And speaking of joining, let's talk about the gatekeeping. Because you'd think a chaotic, devil-worshipping group would take anyone, right?
You would think so, yeah.
No.
But they are aggressively exclusive.
Seriously. The text explicitly bans what they call dabblers. And no order jumpers either. Like, you can't be a jack of all trades, master of none.
And they draw a really hard line against atheistic Satanists.
Yes. If you follow Ayn Rand or the Church of Satan, where Satan's just a metaphor.
They absolutely do not want you. You have to believe in literal, dark, spiritual entities.
Right. And if you do apply, you have to pay a $50 lifetime fee, which, whatever. But you also have to submit your legal government-issued ID.
Which is a huge hurdle. Think about the psychological weight of that for a second. You are tethering your legal identity to an organization that society views with extreme suspicion.
Yeah, you're not just making up a screen name on a forum. You're giving them your home address.
Right. And from a psychological standpoint, this highlights why exclusivity matters. It's the sunk cost fallacy in action.
Meaning, because you invested so much to get in, it must be valuable.
Exactly. Cultivating that feeling of being the true elite force's commitment, it's an all-in mentality.
And it gets even more isolating. Once you're in, you undergo this 6-month probationary period as a 5-degree aspirant, and you have to resign from all other occult or religious groups immediately.
You have to burn your bridges.
Which is wild.
Yeah.
And if you mess up or leak documents, blackballing is permanent. Like lifetime ban, permanent file kept on you at headquarters.
This forced isolation accelerates the indoctrination because, if you leave your old coven or church, you don't have outside peers to give you a reality check anymore.
Right. LML becomes your only source of spiritual validation.
Right.
So having established how exclusive this is,
Yeah.
we have to look at the bureaucracy they actually join. Because this is where it gets surprisingly corporate.
It really is. The degree system is intensely layered.
Okay, so you start as a 5-degree aspirant. Then if you pass probation, you're a 4-degree initiate.
Right.
Then a 3-degree adept.
Right.
Then a 2-degree magistrator. Then a 1-degree priest. And finally, the 0-degree high priest, which only one person can hold. I mean, this sounds like a martial arts belt system or a corporate ladder.
Yeah, it does.
For a group that champions rebellion, why on earth is there so much management?
What's fascinating here is the paradox of the left-hand path, because on one hand, they preach radical individualism, antinomianism, self-deification.
Right, making yourself a god.
Exactly. But on the other hand, they rely on intense standardization. You have a specific curriculum you have to read. Liber Archon, Liber Nagash, Liber Templi Luciferi.
It's like having a syllabus for chaos.
Yeah, it ensures absolute control and uniformity. They convince the adherent that true freedom can only be achieved by mastering this very rigid discipline first.
You have to master the rules to break them. And they even operate on a franchise model, which is just, I can't get over this part.
The structure is very specific.
It is. You have the Black Vatican, which is headquarters. Below that are supreme lodges for national levels, then grand lodges for states and lodges for districts.
Right.
And to run a local lodge, you have to own or rent a home, like a duplex or a townhome. You must have a reliable income. You have to be rational.
It completely undercuts that stereotypical, rebel of the underworld aesthetic.
Seriously, you pay a fee, you get a lodge master's handbook and a framed certificate. A framed certificate of devil worship for your suburban duplex. It's hilarious.
But it's a sharp critique of how ungrounded a lot of modern spiritual movements are.
What do you mean?
A lot of fringe groups fall apart because the leaders can't pay their rent or organize a basic schedule. LML demands that its leaders are functional, solvent participants in society because to build a lasting empire, you need infrastructure.
That makes sense. They even have specific job titles like scribe, secretary, treasurer. They have a security officer to keep profane eyes out.
And the donator title.
Oh yeah, you get the title of donator if you give $200 or more. Because their goals include building a physical Black Vatican temple and raising masters in a world of slaves. It's very capitalistic.
They view the physical world as territory to be conquered, not an illusion to escape. And conquering takes capital.
Definitely. Now, moving from the physical structure to their visual language. Because every corporation has a logo, right? And LML has this highly complex set of sacred symbols.
Symbols are crucial because they bypass the logical brain and trigger an emotional response directly.
Right. So they start with the inverted pentagram, which represents carnal nature, the 5 points of the 5 elements: earth, air, fire, water, and aether.
Aether being the life force or spirit, and by inverting the pentagram, thrusting aether downward into the earth, it's a visual command. It tells the practitioner to stop looking up at the sky and start manipulating the physical world beneath their feet.
Wow. And then there are the unique LML symbols, like the Caput Draconis, the head of the dragon. It represents vanquishing your enemies.
And the Cross of Lorraine, or the Cathar cross.
Yeah, break that down, because it has an infinity symbol at the bottom, right?
Yes. The traditional Hermetic phrase is, as above, so below. But by adding that infinity symbol, LML changes it to, as above, so below, humanity reigns eternally. It's a visual manifesto of self-deification.
Basically removing the need for an external god entirely.
Exactly.
And then there's the quadrigram. This is super mathematically dense. Nagash says he divined this in the 90s. It's a center square with 4 interlocking stars, 12 points total.
Which adds up to 3, the number of Leviathan.
Right. The 8 outer points spell Luciferi, the 4 inner spell Magi, and that center square is the ritual chamber.
When a member meditates on this, they place themselves in that center square. It's a blueprint for intense egocentrism, drawing all the chaos of the universe directly into themselves.
Okay, so all these symbols get combined into one supreme seal, the Magnum Sigil de Laevus Manus, representing Azar Nefer, which means my self-made perfect.
Right.
And this seal sits inside their official crest, which has rampant wolves, representing loyalty to the pack and strength over prey. Tridents facing up. But the craziest part is at the top, a skull with a crown and the numbers 9, 18, and 27.
Which naturally makes you think of, death worship or nihilism.
Right, but here's where it gets really interesting. The text actually uses the skull to represent death as the inevitable king of the fleshy shell. But their conclusion is profoundly life-affirming.
Yeah, it's hyper-materialism.
They argue that because death is absolute and there's no heaven waiting for you, you have to shun death to truly live. Extract every ounce of pleasure out of your current life, which leads to a fiercely anti-suicide stance.
Right, they despise the Christian concept of waiting for heaven.
Yeah, but they view suicide as the ultimate act of weakness, unless someone is facing an incurable, painful disease. I mean, to me, calling it a coward surrender shows a massive lack of empathy for mental health.
It's a harsh Darwinian callousness. The philosophy relies heavily on a survival of the fittest mentality. A god cannot be defeated by depression, so they have to frame it as a failure of will to maintain their illusion of absolute control.
That's a really dark way to look at it. But they frame this godlike control through the symbol of Baphomet, too. The goat with wings and breasts sitting on a globe, with Solve and Coagula written on the arms.
But Baphomet isn't worshipped as a god here.
Right. The text is clear about that.
Yeah.
It's revered as a symbol of sublime perfection and duality, male, female, light, dark.
Solve and coagula mean dissolve and congeal. You have to dissolve your socially conditioned ego, your cultural guilt, and then congeal or rebuild yourself into this self-deified master. Baphomet is just the mirror showing you what you're striving for.
So from visual symbols to foundational theology, every religion has an origin myth, and LML builds theirs on the Great Fall, the story of Lucifer being cast out of heaven. But they actually have two different versions in the text.
Which is a great theological safety net. It appeals to different psychological profiles.
Right. So version 1 is Lucifer as Prometheus. He brings forbidden fire and knowledge to humanity because he feels bad for us suffering in ignorance.
Framing him as a heroic rebel and lightbringer looks fair.
Yeah, turning the devil into a savior. Then version 2 is where Lucifer demands a throne equal to God, and God acts like a petty, tyrannical child and casts him out.
It paints the traditional god as an egotistical kid with an ant farm. If the creator is a tyrant, then rebelling isn't a sin, it's a moral imperative.
And when Lucifer fell, he brought his top lieutenants, the 4 crown princes who took over the 4 corners of the earth.
Right.
You have Lucifer in the east for air and pride, Satan in the south for fire and anger, Belial in the north for earth and strength, and Leviathan in the west for water and chaos.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it ritualizes the physical world. Demonic energy isn't hiding in the shadows, it's the fundamental force motivating all creativity and life on Earth.
Which brings us to human morality. Because if the world is ruled by these entities, how should you act? Well, they take what traditional religions hate and make it their primary virtue, redefining sin.
The core philosophy of antinomianism.
Exactly. The only real sin is denying yourself pleasure. The 7 deadly sins are actually viewed as positive psychological motivators. Let's run through them, because it's fascinating. First, pride, governed by Lucifer.
They define pride as seeing yourself as the most important being in your life. You need that for self-deification.
Right. Then avarice, or greed, governed by Mammon. They say greed prevents apathy and drives progress.
Which aligns perfectly with their corporate goals for the lodges.
Right, absolutely. Then lust, governed by Asmodeus. They view it as the root of all great art and creativity. But envy, governed by Leviathan, is my favorite reframe. They say envy is the ultimate motivator for self-improvement. Like if you're jealous of someone's wealth, use it as fuel to work harder.
They take a passive, negative emotion and convert it into an active drive.
And then there's anger, governed by Satan. They say it's a natural response, but internalizing it causes trauma. So you externalize it through hexes or destroying obstacles so you don't hold on to it.
Yeah, the hex acts as a psychological pressure valve. By formally acknowledging and releasing the anger in a ritual, you don't carry that resentment into your daily life. It's a placebo that provides closure.
Oh, it seems like it could just make you hyper-defensive and paranoid over every little slight.
That is definitely the risk, yeah.
Then there's gluttony, governed by Beelzebub. Basically, if it feels good, do it again.
Right.
But provided it doesn't become a self-destructive addiction, because an addict is a slave, not a master.
Right.
And finally, sloth, governed by Belphegor, which is just unwinding after hard work. So what does this all mean? Is this genuinely empowering or just a justification for extreme selfishness?
Well, by embracing these sins, adherents strip away culturally programmed guilt. It is a highly individualistic survival of the fittest mindset masked as spirituality. It gives them permission to be ruthlessly self-interested.
And to achieve this highly individualized life, practitioners rely on a vast hierarchy of specific entities. demonic middle management, basically.
Yes, the operational bureaucracy of the unseen.
I love diving into this demon list they have to study. Under the princes, you have the Grand Dukes and Lesser Archons, like Astaroth, Grand Duke of Western Hell.
Right, Astaroth.
He appears as a beautiful angel on a dragon holding a viper. But the text warns that you have to protect your face with a magic ring because he has terrible breath. Like, what?
This raises an important question about how modern people interact with these entities. That detail about the bad breath is a masterclass in psychological anchoring.
Okay, explain that, because to me it just sounds like a D&D manual.
Well, in magic, the hardest task is maintaining an unbroken visualization. Your brain naturally wanders. So by forcing the practitioner to visualize an angel on a dragon, holding a ring to their face, and imagining this awful stench...
It forces all the mundane thoughts out.
Exactly. The sheer cognitive load required to maintain that complex hallucination creates the trance state. The specificity makes the abstract concept of magic highly tangible.
That makes so much sense. Think of it like a dark mythological operating system. You need the right code to execute the program. Like Amdusias, a unicorn who gives invisible musical concerts where trees bend.
Right.
Or Boon, a three-headed dragon with the heads of a dog, a griffin, and a man. He haunts cemeteries and moves corpses around, but his secondary function is making men eloquent and rich.
Right. The cognitive dissonance there is staggering.
Yeah. Visualizing a corpse-moving dragon so you can nail your corporate sales presentation.
It highlights the utility of the left-hand path. That grotesque imagery strips away the polite illusions of society. When that person walks into their sales meeting, they're relying on the psychological armor they built the night before. They feel untouchable.
Wow. And they aren't worshiping these middle managers either.
No, you are the CEO of your own reality, calling upon independent contractors to execute your will.
That is just a breathtakingly intricate psychological ecosystem. From a 10-minute bathroom trip emerged a complete universe. An exclusive franchise model, a complex visual alphabet, a reimagined origin myth, reclaimed sins, and a literal phone book of demonic middle managers.
The sheer density of Liber Archon is remarkable. It offers a complete framework for managing your psychology and pursuing material goals.
It really does. But I want to leave you, the listener, with a final thought to mull over as we wrap up. The entire philosophy of Laevus Manus Luciferi is built on the ultimate rebellion. Rejecting societal norms, rejecting traditional gods, and making yourself the absolute center of the universe.
Right, it promises radical freedom.
But to achieve that freedom, they created an organization with strict dress codes, mandatory book reading, quarterly financial reports, and a rigidly enforced corporate ladder. So when a movement based entirely on absolute radical freedom builds itself an inescapable bureaucracy, does it actually achieve liberation? Or did it just build a brand new cage?
Yeah. Did you just paint the bars black and convince yourself it was a throne?
Exactly. Thank you for taking this deep dive into the hidden architecture of the left-hand path with us. Keep questioning the structures around you, whether they were drafted in a boardroom or envisioned in a 10-minute hallucination.